It's bound to be better than mine. It's tricky for me because I run quite a stock setup, so I don't have many extra essential apps that I haven't already mentioned. So I'm already out with essential apps now.
Well, for those, we're now live, Darren, by the way. And so for
No
those who are
worries.
joining us, we were just talking about essential apps and how Darren is coming up short this episode with creating an
Absolutely.
essential app for. No, no, no. I have a number of essential apps in my back pocket, and I'm always ready to share. Kind of. This and so I've got one. I've got one. We're good.
Fab.
We're good. Oh, hey. We were already visited by Bryan. Well, he stopped in before we even went live, I think.
Oh, keen.
Yeah, I know. And you know what? I did want to start at the very beginning here, Darren. I wanted to start with a little explanation of what we're doing here with the live stream. I never really, well, I did explain it way back in the beginning, but I kind of think a little explainer at the beginning of every live stream might be useful. Because what we do here is we actually live stream the recording of the podcast. So
Indeed, we
the
do.
whole point in our live streaming is to record the podcast, right? And so I'm actually recording here on my mixer and recording both sides of the conversation, and ultimately that is what I edit down for the podcast. By the way, I'm also recording an eCam. So sometimes I'll use the eCam recordings, sometimes I'll use my mixer recordings, but in essence, I use the recordings from this live stream to create the audio show that we've now been producing for over 19 years. So what you're going to see here, what you see when you watch the live stream, is what I affectionately call the warts and all recording of the show, or the warts and all presentation
Yeah.
of the show, I should say. So this
How the sausage gets made.
the sausage gets made, exactly. Which, yeah, we don't want to know how the sausage is made,
No,
but
no.
how the podcast is made is a completely different issue. Anyone who's read The Jungle never ever wants to hear about how sausage is made again in their life.
Absolutely.
You've read that, I'm sure, right? Upton Sinclair's The
haven't,
Jungle?
no.
You haven't? Oh,
No, it's a new one to me. I need to expand my reading.
well, yeah. It's a good book, Upton Sinclair, The Jungle. You know, essential reading in well, let's see. When did I read that? I read that in junior high, so it must have been 7th grade, 8th grade, something like that. We read that for one of our classes. It'll put you off certain foods.
My God, will I become vegetarian?
Maybe.
I might do.
Maybe.
Maybe.
So right there, that little rat hole. So all the pre-show stuff, rat hole conversations about the jungle, and comments from listeners like Bryan, who joined us in the chat room and said he's going to be off and about, but he's going to be checking in on the show from time to time. Have a great day. Well, thanks, Bryan. I hope you have a great day too. It's really a beautiful day here. You're in England, so your weather is probably not so good, Bryan.
Well, it's dark and cold and miserable
Darren.
here.
Dark and cold and miserable. That's England, right?
Well, not all the time, but
No.
certainly
I
now.
tease. I know it's not that all the time. In fact, it was kind of dark and cold this week here. And today we got a little bit of sun. It's chilly, but we got a little bit of sun. And so anyway, I take all these rat hole conversations and gaffes and all kinds of stuff that goes on while we're recording here, and I edit that out and create the audio edition of the show that's released for the podcast. And I'll mention this as we start the recording, but you can always catch us live streaming. No, I shouldn't say always. You can usually catch us live streaming at 1 p.m. Central Time, Chicago time, on the second and fourth Saturday of each month. Now, with holidays coming up, that schedule might get jiggled around a little bit. Sometimes one or either or all of us, I should say, need to take time off, and we reschedule the show around that. But in general, the second and fourth Saturday of the month at 1 p.m. Central Time, and you can catch the live stream, which, if you're watching this after the fact, you can catch the live stream, youtube.com/FMEOTV, or if you're watching it live now, I really didn't need to tell you that, did I? So there you go. That's what we're doing.
That's okay. You can cut that bit out.
Cut that bit out. That's what we're doing. And sometimes we'll go on for, a good, how long have we been going on so far? A little while.
Oh, not 10 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, six minutes live. Okay. So
Yep.
sometimes we go on for a good 30, and you'll catch all kinds of interesting conversations that don't make the final cut of the show. And again, you can join us in the chat room. The only rules for joining in the chat room are you need to subscribe to the show, which is free. Just click the subscribe button on YouTube. Just click that button. And you need to be a subscriber for at least 5 minutes, I think is the deal. And that's mostly to stop fly-by-night chatters.
Yeah.
But if you are a fly-by-night chatter, just know I have a ban button here. So, and I'm not afraid to use it. No, I can't. We've never had to use it.
Yeah.
But what else is going on, Darren? Anything we need to talk about, chat about, share before we get to recording the show?
No, not really. I mean, I could say one thing. I did have a good experience at our local Apple Emporium here, and everything went smoothly. So, as many may know, or some may know, that I bought myself a nice shiny new iPhone 17 Pro, and I did a phone-to-phone transfer, because I had some specific stuff to take off the old one, and they said, no worries, you got a 2-week window, bring in your old phone for trade-in within those 2 weeks. And
for the trade-in,
no worries.
okay.
So, exactly, yeah. So my second visit to the Apple store, I did a trade-in experience. Everything went super smooth. The person I saw there was absolutely fabulous, and everything was perfect. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I kept my phone in very good condition, even though it was 5 years old, believe it or not. Not a nick or a scratch on it. It was in lovely condition, so I got the full trade-in value. So that's.
And you do or don't use a case? I think you said you don't use a case, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I hadn't used a case on that phone for 5 years, and traded it in full value, and everything was pristine on it. So that's really good.
Honestly, it's not that hard to keep the phone pristine. There's certain
I'm pretty careful. Yeah.
simple practices, and I think one of the things that people often do is they stick it in their pocket with their keys or things like that might scratch it up.
That's it. I have a dedicated phone pocket for so nothing else goes in there with the phone. It's a pet rule of mine.
A dedicated phone pocket. Boy, that is dedication, Darren.
Yeah, every bit of clothing I buy has to have a dedicated phone pocket.
So you are a big proponent of Scott eVest, then?
Oh, I could be, yes, indeed. If they were, I think they are available for shipping here as well. But I've never partook in such a thing. But yeah, they would be super useful probably. But no, pretty much, yeah. I just pop it in a pocket with nothing else, and make sure nothing else is able to impact my phone, and I'm good to go.
Excellent. Talk about rat holes. it's interesting to have paid attention to the evolution or evolution, depending on how you like to pronounce it. I usually say evolution, but I think you probably say evolution.
Either or either.
Either or either, of the phone pocket. They're like shorts. When I buy shorts, there's also often well, look, I'm a dad, so I buy dad shorts. I buy cargo shorts, right? And they often have a dedicated phone pocket. And it's interesting
yes,
to watch that evolution of the phone pocket from the little flip phone size on up to the early iPhone and Android phone size to now the ginormous, Pro and plus size phones that some folks like to carry around these days. So those 6.7-inch screens, you got to put them somewhere. So the dedicated phone pockets almost become the size of regular pockets these days. The downfall being, of course, that if you have a smaller phone, a 6.1-inch or a smaller phone, sometimes it can be a little tricky to get them out of that pocket. But
yeah, it was amazing when you look back at the original, the first iPhone I bought, which was a 3GS, I believe.
Tiny phone.
I mean, when you look at it now, it's like 3 point something inches. I can't remember how big it was, but you look at it and think, how on earth did we survive on a screen that small? And at the time, it was the absolute biggest screen you could get in the mobile world. It was amazingly huge.
I don't know if it was the biggest. There were bigger phones. There were bigger screen phones.
Were there? Okay, fair enough. I'm comparing them to the Palm Pilots of the time, and because they had half their screen taken up, and the other phone that was popular at the time, the BlackBerry, for instance, so comparable screen sizes, they were bigger. So there were probably things like the iPac or the early Windows CE phones or something like that. They were probably bigger screens.
Not much.
But they were horrifically horrible to use.
well, there's that. Phone screen, easy to use.
Yeah.
All right. Oh boy, what do you think about getting started? Should we get started?
Why not? That sounds like a great idea.
I seem to have a little bit of a frog in my throat today. I don't know what's going on with that, but I'll just apologize up front. Clear my throat a little bit, and I think we can get started. I did a little rundown, we did a little rundown of the show at the beginning before we went live, so I think we're good to go.
Cool.
So here, I should probably check and see what this notification. Oh, okay, nothing important. All right, good.
Well, yeah, that's the point. I should put myself on
D&D. And I don't mean the role-playing game. Well, are you muted? No, you're not muted. Are you muted? You're not muted.
Yes, I was muted.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
There you go. I'm back again.
You're back. All right. Well, let us get going then. I am going to write down where we've started here. 1335. And for some reason my hand wrote 25, but that's okay. And then 2045 on the mixer. Okay, cool. Here we go then. In 3, 2, 1. It's For Mac Guys Only, episode number 460 for October 25th, 2025. Troubleshooting Privacy. Hey everyone, welcome back to For Mac Guys Only, the show for the Mac community, where we share our thoughts and opinions on current Mac news and events. And joining me to wrap up season 19 of For Mac Guys Only is For Mac Guys Only co-host Darren Davies. Hey Darren, how you doing?
Hello there.
And remember, we do normally record For Mac Guys Only live on YouTube the second and fourth Saturday of the month. And if you would like to come hang out, ask questions, and be part of our live studio audience, be sure to subscribe to the show at youtube.com/FMEO TV. And if you are joining us live today, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that chat room, which is over here to my right. And if you have any questions or comments, drop them in there, and we will try to address them here on the show. Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, Darren, this episode marks the end of our 19th season of For Mac Guys Only, which means,
Wow.
yes, the 20th year of For Mac Guys Only begins on November 8th. I hope everyone is going to stay tuned in because in addition to our regular content, all the fun stuff we talk about every episode, we also have a few awesome special guests who are lined up in the weeks ahead. I'm not going to say who just yet, and we don't have them scheduled for which day they're going to join us, but they're pretty cool guests, and they're going to be joining us to share their knowledge on a few topics that I don't think we have ever covered in the 20 years of the show. And if we have covered them, I can't remember it, so it's new to me. But this episode, as we mark the end of another season, I thought it's only appropriate to wrap up with a discussion brought about by a listener question. And it's a question that also ties into another celebration that will be taking place in 2026, and that is the 10th anniversary of Macstock, a conference that I started because of and thanks to the For Mac Guys Only listening community. So thank you, everyone, for your inspiration on that. Thank you for those of you who join us at Macstock, and hopefully we'll see you at Macstock 10 in July 2026. Now, moving on to the question, this question actually has to do with privacy settings and how sometimes if you take those settings too far, you can actually harm your online experience. Now, I did want to give a little back history on this question. This does have to do with the Macstock website, and it has to do with something that I offer to attendees as well as those who decide to purchase it separately, and that is the Macstock Digital Pass, which is the ability to go back and re-watch the talks from Macstock after the weekend comes to a close. Well, the way I distribute these is via the Macstock website, and I use a service called Vimeo to host the videos for me. This is not a free video hosting service like YouTube is. It is something that I actually pay for, and part of the reason I pay for it is because Vimeo gives me certain capabilities for distributing the videos, like limiting what websites can host the video and where people can watch the video from. So I can lock, if you will, I can lock a video to a particular domain. And in this case, I do lock it to macstockconferenceandexpo.com as well as macstockconference.com, depending on how people visit the site. Now, that's kind of the setup. Now, this conversation that I had with a listener and Macstock attendee actually is a little bit of a lesson in troubleshooting as well. So as we go through this, you're going to hear a little bit of back and forth. I tried to pare it down a little bit for my notes for the podcast here, but you're going to hear a little back and forth. But I did want to share the process because when you're troubleshooting, it's kind of important to pick out the little clues that you might hear or read as you're working with someone to help determine the next step. What direction should you point the person next? And often, especially when you don't know what's going on, the little clues that you pick up in the responses that they give you, whether verbally or via email, will be the clues that lead you to giving them something else to try. So I thought that these troubleshooting steps I went through to help figure out what was causing the problem for this attendee would be good to go through, and it would be helpful no matter what kind of troubleshooting problem you may have. So And that's kind of the setup. Darren, I know you're very familiar with that type of troubleshooting as well. You do this on a daily basis, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. You often have to you do a big overview question to start with to see which path you're likely to go down. Often you can ask just one question and you can split the path in two, and it's a 50-50. And then as you ask more questions and you split those paths down, you eventually get to the right answer, hopefully.
Hopefully, hopefully. And sometimes you don't know the answer, but you stumble upon
Yep.
it later, which is actually the case here. And the way you described that, Darren, is pretty much exactly what happened. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the question here. This is from Bill, and it was a fairly simple question. He wrote, I attended my first Macstock conference this past July, and I've heard on various podcasts, and probably through the Macstock newsletter as well, because I did announce it there. But he writes, I heard on various podcasts that the videos of the conference are now available. However, when I log in and try to watch them, the videos don't play, and there's a message that I don't have access to them. What's up? Okay, well, that's all I had to work with. And that was a good question because I have a testing account for the site. I have a couple testing accounts for the site, and they have various versions of the name TestBot. And they don't do anything except allow me to see the site as an attendee would see the site. That's all they allow me to do. So when I would log into the site with one of those test accounts, everything worked exactly as it should. I signed in. I would visit the page, the digital pass page for Macstock 9, and there are the videos. Okay, so what's the problem? I also checked to make sure that Bill had access, because in order to access the videos, you, one, have to purchase a ticket to Macstock or purchase a digital pass. And then when you do that, you get assigned access to that pass. And it's all done with a membership component of my website. So there are various memberships, one for each year of Macstock. And in this case, it would be a membership to the Macstock 9 digital pass. So naturally, I made sure that he had access to that because based on his question, I wasn't even sure that he was getting that far. He says the videos don't play, but more importantly, he wrote that there was a message he didn't have access to them. So I thought, well, okay, maybe he got missed. Maybe he didn't actually get assigned access to the Macstock 9 digital pass. So that was the first thing I checked. And everything looked good there too. So what was going on in Bill's case? What was he doing differently than what I was doing with my test bot? So my first response to Bill was basic troubleshooting. And the first step is to, of course, make sure he's on the correct page of the site. So one of the things I sent him in my reply was a direct link to that particular page. So rather than take him through the whole sign-in process, I said, go directly to this page. Go directly to the Macstock 9 digital pass page. He won't be signed in, so he'll be presented with a sign-in box. And if I know he's signing in on that page, cool, then I know he's in the right place. So I sent that direct link. I shared the login process again. And kind of importantly, and I think this is very important with troubleshooting these days, I sent a screenshot. I said, once you're signed in, this is what you should see. I also explained to Bill that the videos, as I mentioned here a moment ago, the videos are being fed to the page from Vimeo. None of this is a secret. I don't mind sharing that I use Vimeo. So I told him they're being shared by Vimeo. So please, make sure that you're not blocking Vimeo.com. Make sure you're not blocking it in your browser, and make sure that you're not blocking, because I know some browsers have this capability, make sure that you don't have any strict blocking of third-party embeds within your browser.
Yeah.
Some browsers are more strict than others, but again, keep in mind at this point, I don't know anything about his setup, right? So we're trying to figure out at this point, what is the setup and where is the problem occurring? I don't even know what browser he's using. So I moved on. And I said, assuming that all of that looks okay, and I was kind of assuming that that was the case at this point, but assuming that all looks okay, it might be worth trying an alternate browser. I just always go to that as a good troubleshooting step. If you're using Chrome, try Edge. If you're using Edge, try Firefox. If you're using Firefox, try Safari. If you're using Safari, just try a different browser, for goodness sakes. Because sometimes the browser settings get completely off the rails, and you can easily determine that by trying another one. So again, are you using Safari? I thought perhaps he probably was. So if you are using Safari, try Firefox or try Edge. Is it better? Is it worse? Is it the same? That kind of simple troubleshooting. What's that?
Oh, just piled in there saying, not necessarily browsers that are better than others, but just different. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, a browser is not necessarily better than others. I may disagree with you on that one, Darren, but
we have your favorite.
we all have our favorite browsers, and even to this day, some people still have Chrome as a favorite browser. Hey, personal tastes. But the point is, when you switch to a different browser, is it better? Is it worse? Is it the same? And what I wanted to know is it the same? That's really what I wanted to know, because at that time, this early in the conversation, I had a feeling that it was something being blocked in his browser. But I wrapped up that email by asking him to let me know what he found out, as well as, again, send me a screenshot of what he's seeing, because that is super important. What I am assuming he's seeing may be completely different than what he's actually seeing. So send me a screenshot. Let me know what you're seeing. Like I said, basic troubleshooting. And Bill got back to me a couple days later, and he wrote, I'm using Safari as my browser. Okay, cool. Now we know he's using Safari. And in Safari, he has no active content blockers. And in settings, aka preferences, he writes, he switched autoplay from never to allow all. Okay, well, that's a pretty good troubleshooting step that he took there, because many browsers have the ability to block autoplaying of videos. Firefox does, Safari does. Wonderful setting. I'm glad to have that. It doesn't always work, mind you, but I'm glad to have that setting. But it was a good troubleshooting step on his part to switch autoplay from never to allow all, just in case. And he refreshed the page with no change. So he said, if there's another setting I should look for, please let me know. Okay, cool. Now I have something to test. The only problem is I tested in Safari, which is not my day-to-day browser. I tested in Safari, and it worked. Okay. Back to the drawing board. But his screenshot that he did include confirmed something for me. And what it confirmed for me is that Vimeo, remember I said a moment ago that I instruct Vimeo to only allow embeds on certain domains. Well, Vimeo, according to Bill's screenshot, thought or seemed to think that he was visiting the site from another domain, not the Macstock domain. Oh. In fact, Vimeo outright told him, this is private. You don't have permission to watch here. That's exactly what it said. This is private. You don't have permission to watch here. Okay. So for some reason, Vimeo thinks not that Vimeo is perfectly happy with the way I'm visiting the site, But the way Bill is visiting the site, Vimeo thinks he's not trying to watch the video from the Macstock website. That's very interesting. So I went back to some more troubleshooting. And the question that came to mind, and I know, immediately someone who hears this is going to say, well, that wouldn't be the case because, but the question that came to mind is Bill using a proxy to connect to websites? Is he using a VPN app to connect to websites? Because at this point, I was just looking for anything that would change the URL of the site such that Vimeo might be fooled into thinking that it's not trying to play on the Macstock website. And Bill got back to me. He wrote, currently using Cloudflare's Warp as per the presentation that Jeff Gamet made at the conference. Ooh, that Jeff. Every time there's a problem, it's Jeff Gamet who causes the problem. I tell you, that Jeff...
Brilliant.
Jeff's such a good guy. He'd feel bad if he heard me say that. So I'm going to make sure I send it to him.
Excellent.
But Bill continued. I had previously tried turning that off, but it didn't fix things. I tried again this morning and have the same result. When I turned off Warp this morning, I noticed that iCloud Private Relay kicked in, so I turned that off too and rebooted my computer. Same result. I don't have any other VPN-like programs running. Okay, but this is a huge clue. Absolutely huge. Now I know he's using Cloudflare Warp. This is something that could potentially get in the way of what I'm trying to feed him via my website. And because Cloudflare Warp is installed on his computer as a whole, that would mean that, in theory, any web browser that's trying to access my site could potentially be blocked or could cause this problem when visiting the Macstock website and trying to watch a video. So after doing a little research into Cloudflare Warp works, I found the following. This is a quote from Vimeo's website. I think it's Vimeo's website. It might be Cloudflare's website. I can't remember where I found this, but it's a direct quote. If a video's privacy settings on Vimeo are configured to allow embedding only on specific domains, that's me, and the website's requests are routed through Cloudflare's network, a mismatch can occur. The embedding request may not appear to come from the correct domain, causing the video to be blocked. Boom. I thought I found the answer. I thought this was the answer. So I let Bill know that it may be Cloudflare Warp causing the issue. And after digging into Cloudflare Warp settings a bit, it seems I found that even when you turn it off, there may still be some components of Cloudflare Warp active in the background, even when it's off.
Ooh,
so
good.
I knew he turned it off. I knew he said he turned it off. Now, he also mentioned rebooting the computer, and rebooting the computer would probably turn it back on again. I'm not a user of Cloudflare Warp, so I didn't know that with certainty, but I kind of assumed that if you turn it off, reboot, it's going to be back on again. So I suggested the following per Cloudflare. Select the Warp app icon, which is in the menu bar, and then select the cog icon and preferences, and under the connection tab, look for DNS protocol and try changing it to HTTPS and see if that helps. And if it doesn't fix it, they also suggested trying the TLS option. Now, I also found that if the previous steps didn't help, that you may need to make one other change, and that is to go into the Warp app icon, go back into preferences, or just select the cog icon and choose your preferred mode of operation for Warp. And in this case, the suggestion was made to try changing it to the 1.1.1.1 resolver mode. Now, 1.1.1.1 folks may recognize as Cloudflare's name servers. Much like Google's 8.8.8.8 or 8.8.4.4, or what is OpenDNS's 208.67.220.220 or
Wow.
208.67.222.222. Yes, I know all of these, Darren.
That's very impressive.
I know, right? It's impressive or scary or sad. It's probably more sad than
or
anything.
possibly all three, but yeah, mostly
Possibly
impressive.
a combination of all three. But in any event, yeah, that's Cloudflare's name servers, and it's often suggested to use 1.1.1.1 or 8.8.8.8 or 208.67.222.222 or whatever, which is OpenDNS, in place of your ISP's name servers. These name servers are much speedier because they have their tendrils through a much wider portion of the internet. They're quicker to get you a response, and often safer because if you are trying to visit a bad, quote, bad website by way of one of these resolvers, one of these name servers, they will often block it and say, hey, this is a bad website, you don't want to go there. OpenDNS is good at that, and I'm pretty sure Cloudflare does the same thing. So, yeah, that was the other suggestion, is try changing it to the 1.1.1.1 resolver mode. And with that suggestion, with those suggestions to Bill, we started to crawl into the weeds a little bit more because Bill wrote back. Again, this is troubleshooting, folks. This is the type of stuff you need and want to go through when you're trying to help someone resolve a problem. So Bill wrote back, I've gone so far as to uninstall Cloudflare altogether. I've turned iCloud private relay off. I'm running a very basic machine. This is something you can appreciate, Darren. I'm running a very basic machine with no Safari extensions and almost no third-party apps. Okay, so with that response, and by the way, doing all that, turning off iCloud private relay, uninstalling Cloudflare, no change. Still couldn't play the video. So that whole thing I found about Cloudflare potentially causing a problem, playing embedded Vimeo videos that are locked to a domain, out the window, completely out the window, because he's no longer using Cloudflare. But I did ask Bill to check one other thing. And I did not think that this should make a difference, but I asked him to go under his Mac's settings, go into Wi-Fi, because I did know at this point he was using Wi-Fi to connect to his router. Go into the Wi-Fi settings, click details next to his wireless network, and then first go into proxies and make sure that all those are turned off. I honestly don't know what Cloudflare Warp does. It might set up a proxy. So maybe even though it was uninstalled, there's still a proxy set up in there.
Maybe.
So I said, make sure that those are all turned off. And then under DNS, see what's listed under DNS servers, because he may still have 1.1.1.1 in there. If so, select it and then click the little minus button to remove it. Now, as I said a moment ago, in truth, 1.1.1.1 is fine to have in there. Not only do I have that in my DNS server settings for all my Macs, but I also have 8.8.8.8, and I have 208.67.222.222, which, as I said, is OpenDNS. So I've got all three of those in there. And all the computers, all the devices on my network at home have those three DNS resolvers or name servers on them, because I set them up at my router level. So on my router level, I replace the ISP's name servers with those, so that any device that grabs an IP address from my router via DHCP is going to get those as their name servers. So little side tip in there, set it up at your router, and then you don't have to do it on a per device basis. But I was thinking that if 1.1.1.1 Cloudflare's DNS resolver was in there and that was his only DNS server, obviously traffic would still be routed through there. But maybe, through simple troubleshooting, maybe removing it might help. Again, it's a fine name server to use. Do you use any of those, Darren? Do you use?
I don't know. This is shocking. I actually use the DNS provider from my ISP.
Oh, don't do that. No, it's fine.
Oh no, don't do
it's
that.
Fine.
Yeah.
You can do that. But what you'll find,
I'm thinking it would be a good idea to change away from that, actually. So yes.
Yeah, what you'll find is that in situations, and I run into this more than the average person might run into this, I should point out, but in situations where you're setting up a new domain or you're setting up a new website, these third-party name servers are going to get updated so much more quickly than your ISP's name servers are going to get updated. So when you're trying to see changes made to a website or changes made, or a new website is launched, or you've changed providers for your domain name, your registrar, you've changed your registrar. Those kind of changes are seen much more quickly by these large name servers.
Absolutely.
Being further
when a
out
DNS
there,
change does happen, it takes a long time for it to ripple through essentially the world's DNS server.
It's called propagation.
List. So propagation indeed.
And that propagation can take, well, the rule of thumb is 24 to 72 hours.
Exactly.
But when you're working with larger entities like Cloudflare and Google and OpenDNS and what have you, those changes can often be seen by them within minutes. Like I've seen changes happen within 30 minutes instead of that 12, 24, 36, 72 hours. So it's helpful for that purpose too. But I also added, and you probably won't be surprised by this suggestion, Darren, but I also added, if he hasn't yet, try Firefox. Even if he wants to continue using Safari as his default browser, for no other reason than testing purposes. And this is because Apple security settings like private relay only work. They only apply to Safari. If you turn them on, they don't affect third-party browsers at all. So get a third-party browser on there. And if I'm going to suggest a third-party browser, it's going to be Firefox, and see what happens.
It's a good choice for diagnosing. Yeah,
it would be a good choice because something like Cloudflare Warp would affect all browsers on your Mac. And because Firefox is safe, it's fast, it's privacy focused, and it's just a gosh darn good browser. If he wanted to test to see if we can narrow it down further, go to getfirefox.com, download the latest version, put it on your Mac. It's simple install, simple uninstall, and at least if it does or doesn't work with Firefox, then maybe we've narrowed down the potential culprits, right? Now, what I really liked, and at this point, after all the stuff I've just explained, what I really liked, in fact, I could even say what I really enjoyed, is Bill's willingness to troubleshoot along with me, because I honestly didn't know the answer. I couldn't reproduce the problem. So his willingness to troubleshoot and not just throw up his hands and say, well, forget it, I don't need to watch the videos anyway or whatever. And by the way, at this point, I had given him an alternate way just for him to watch the videos. I had given him another way to do it because I wanted him to be able to watch them. But I didn't want to take this alternate route for everyone because it reduces the security of the videos and the site and all that. But for one person, it's fine. So I'd already given him an alternate way. So in that sense, he was taken care of, but we still had this problem. Why can't Bill watch the videos via Safari on his Mac? I don't know. But he was willing to troubleshoot it. So that was great. And it wasn't long before he got back to me And he wrote, he did in fact have 1.1.1.1 as his DNS server. He deleted it. He added the other two that I suggested, and it didn't fix the issue. Now, he downloaded DuckDuckGo from the Mac App Store. That is an excellent alternative. If you're not going to go get Firefox, get DuckDuckGo. But now I'm sensing he really wanted something he could get through the Mac App Store, and Firefox is not something you can get through there. So he went to the Mac App Store and he found DuckDuckGo and he downloaded it, which is great, and it worked fine. It worked fine. He was able to sign on the Macstock site and watch the videos with DuckDuckGo. Wonderful. Wonderful, because now we know more. And after he wrote, after the above two successes, he went back and he tried 1.1.1.1 as his DNS server, and the change had no impact at all on DuckDuckGo, and those two new access methods still worked. And what he means by two new access methods is that other way I gave him of watching the videos. And Safari never worked with the original site. In other words, the Macstock site. He still couldn't get Safari to work. Now, there were a few other tests and things to try that I gave Bill, and I won't detail all of those. They were just little minor things I asked him to troubleshoot and test for me. But with his DuckDuckGo experiment successful, I now really felt this was a Safari issue. It's a setting, or maybe some setting in Safari in combination with Apple's private relay. I don't know. It didn't make sense to me, but something in Safari was causing the problem.
Yeah.
The good news, of course, was that Bill could now watch the videos. The bad news was that we still hadn't solved the problem. And the worst part, to me, as someone who, when someone gives me a problem like this, I can't let it go. Do you do the same thing? My brain...
Oh, that sounds familiar.
My brain latches onto this, and I can't... I don't want to say I can't sleep, but, it's like that. It's like it's just constantly churning in your head.
It's worse in this case because you're hosting a Mac-focused show and podcast and event. And the primary browser on all Macs, when people subscribe to said video, isn't playable. So your audience is locked out. So really finding the actual problem is paramount. Yeah.
And not only that, but it's just a portion of the audience. It's Bill. Because, multiple Macs.
Yeah. How many others? Exactly.
How many others, and how many others didn't bother to email me, didn't bother to say, hey, I can't watch these videos. Yeah. And that's a nice lead-in, Darren, because the next worst part is that I received a second email from Linda describing the exact same problem. So
excellent.
Yeah, excellent. That's exactly what I thought. Excellent. This is perfect.
At least it's consistent, though.
At least it's consistent. Now, the question, though, of course, when you're troubleshooting is what was in common between Bill and Linda? Why aren't others having this problem? Because I do know others who use Safari who could watch the videos because they told me about a certain video they watched or a certain segment that they rewatched again. And I know that they're Safari users. So what was in common between Bill and Linda? And why can't I reproduce it? Well, it turns out, and call this a red herring or not, but it turns out that both Bill and Linda had upgraded to Tahoe, and I hadn't. So the question became, is Tahoe the problem? Is Tahoe what's causing these issues? Now, go back to our last episode, now you know why I had to go ahead and upgrade that Mac Mini. That Mac
Absolutely.
Mini
You're a test bed now, at least. Yeah.
Became my test bed for trying to solve this problem. Now, the bad news, or good news, depending on how you want to look at it, was that in upgrading this Mac Mini to Tahoe, I confirmed that it was not a Tahoe issue. Now, why was that bad news? Because that meant I couldn't foist the problem off onto Apple's shoulders. I couldn't say, you know what, I apologize for the problems you're having, but this is a bug in Tahoe, and there's nothing I can do about it. Instead, the answer became, it's still my problem. So that told me more troubleshooting was in order. So at this point, and we're almost done with the troubleshooting, I tore into every single security and privacy setting that Safari offered. And while I won't detail every single thing I did there, I will say that after a lot of noodling and turning on and turning off and turning on and turning off settings, I found the answer. And I should probably kind of add in there, it is important when you're troubleshooting something like this, if you turn a setting on, you need to take note of what that setting is so that you remember to turn it off again. Because if you turn on a setting or turn off a setting and there's no change, you don't want to keep building upon that by continuing to turn on or off settings and not know which combination of those is causing the problem. So taking notes and remembering to switch things back on or off again as you're troubleshooting is important at this point. Turns out I was able to reproduce the problem if I change one single Safari setting. And this is under their default privacy settings in Safari. So under Safari settings, under privacy, there's a little button that says advanced settings. So right there, the advanced settings is often a here be dragons type button, right? If I go into advanced settings in Safari and I look for the setting, use advanced tracking and fingerprinting protection, the default setting for that is in private browsing.
Yep.
But if I change that to in all browsing, that breaks Safari's ability to display the embedded videos from Vimeo. So I asked Bill to change the setting to, well, first I asked Bill if he had that setting set that way. He did. So I said, change that setting to in private browsing. In other words, set it back to the default. Set it back to what Apple suggests and see if that restores Safari's ability for him to display the videos for the Macstock Digital Pass. And boom, that did it. Not only for Bill.
Lo and behold, it worked.
Lo and behold, it worked. And it worked for Linda as well. Now,
excellent.
That was the troubleshooting. That was how we solved the problem. Why do you keep having confetti going off on your end? I don't know why you have confetti.
Oh, it's just to celebrate.
Anyway,
you got the answer.
That did lead to Bill's. What was I saying? Oh, that solved it for Bill, but also Linda.
Yes.
Now, that did lead to Bill's final question, and believe it or not, that final question is going to be our main topic today. It wasn't all that troubleshooting stuff. We're now getting to the main topic. Because Bill wrote, by the way, although I had deleted Cloudflare on my MacBook Air, it's still installed on the iMac that he's writing this on. And for the record, after changing the Safari setting, the website works even with Warp actively running, which is fantastic news. So it's no longer Warp's fault. It's no longer Proxy. It's no longer Nameservers. It's a simple Safari setting. That's all it is. And his initial test a few minutes ago was on the Air. Cool. So Bill was fixed, Linda was fixed, and I now know how to answer anybody else who has this exact same problem. Or I hope I know how to answer it, because I might give them the solution and they say, nope, still not working. Then we start a whole new round of troubleshooting. But this seems to be it. It does seem that at some point, folks like Bill and Linda were told, hey, turn this on. This will add to your privacy. Without also mentioning that it may break websites you visit.
It may break some websites.
Which is important. So, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But here's the question that Bill wrote as a follow-up. He said, out of curiosity, do you know what the advanced tracking and fingerprinting protection does versus web surfing with it off? And he says, clicking on the question mark next to the setting offers no explanation. And that's true. There's absolutely zero explanation. Apple simply says, you can turn it on if you want to. Okay, thanks, Apple. That helps a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
But tell me what it is. So that's a very interesting question. It's a somewhat involved question, but I tried to give him a little bit of a big overview for what the answer is. Because it's not necessarily a new feature to privacy-focused browsers like Firefox, but it is a new feature in Safari, a relatively new feature. When did it come out? Sequoia, maybe? I don't remember exactly.
Yes, it is. It is that far back, but each implementation is slightly different, and this is where the problem lies.
Yeah. So it's been around for a little while, but compared to other browsers, it's relatively new in Safari land. So I thought I would give my little rundown to Bill for how I would explain it. Then what I'd like to do is toss it over to you, Darren, because I know that you have some thoughts on this as well. You did a little bit more research. I did a lot of research to figure out what was causing the problem. And then when Bill asked that follow-up question, I did a little research into what this is so I could explain it to him. You know, sometimes you know what something does in your head, but when you try to explain it, it comes out like, and then the toad jumped over the street, and that makes absolutely no sense to anybody. But if you, do a little research, maybe you can explain it better. So here's how I explained it to Bill. In broad terms, the advanced tracking and fingerprinting refers to a technique where a website may try to use they may try to use means to identify you by taking note of things like the browser agent. In other words, what browser are you using to visit the website? They might take note of things like the operating system you're using. They might take note of things like the resolution of your screen. You know, things like that. This is all stuff that your browser happily gives out to the world, and browsers have been giving out this information for ages. And it's things like that that help a website better determine how to display content to you. Now, this was a lot more important back in the day, because browsers weren't as compatible with each other. They weren't as standardized as they are now. The whole web world was kind of up in arms because for those who've been around long enough, you may remember the little animated GIFs at the bottom of websites that said, best viewed when using Internet Explorer.
Oh, yes.
And sometimes you'll even come across, to this day, you'll come across messages that say, I see you're visiting with Safari. You should be using Chrome to visit our website.
Best viewed in Chrome.
Best viewed in Chrome. Or you could get off your lazy duff and make a website that's standards compliant, right?
Absolutely. Right on. You tell it.
But they determine that by things like the browser agent that's being sent out and telling the website, this is who I am. This is the browser I'm using. And some of the other information that might get sent out to the site, like the screen resolution and operating system and things like that, is often important to a website. And again, these days maybe a little bit less so, but it can be used in a positive way. Now, in a negative way, this is often used in place of cookies when third-party cookies are otherwise blocked. So a third-party cookie is when you visit a website and there's an ad off in the corner, and that ad might try to set a cookie on your computer. A cookie is just a plain text string. There's nothing particularly nefarious or executable about a cookie. It's just text. But it is a setting. It's a way for a website to store settings about how you like to interact with that site. Well, third-party cookies are when there's an ad or an embedded component, like those Vimeo videos are embedded on my website. So Vimeo might set a cookie to remember how you prefer to interact with their videos. That's a third-party cookie. Third-party cookies get kind of a bad rap because advertisers use them. And so browsers started to add a little checkbox that says block third-party cookies. And I recommend people turn that on. Turn on block third-party cookies. I have never had a problem with third-party cookies blocked. I don't know about you, Darren, but it's a great feature, and it helps.
Yeah.
In a small way, it helps stop advertisers in particular. And most of the, quote, nefarious stuff we're going to be talking about is advertisers. But it stops them from following you around by setting a cookie on your computer, right?
Yeah.
So when third-party cookies are otherwise blocked, that means that when you visit a website and there's a third-party component being displayed to you, they can't set a cookie. And again, that's often ads on the site. So what they do is they try to recognize you based on other things, aka fingerprint you.
Yeah.
They try to determine what's the resolution of your screen, what browser are you using, blah blah blah, all that stuff. So when this feature is enabled, when the advanced tracking and fingerprinting feature is enabled, and by default it's enabled in private browsing, when it's enabled, Safari will send fake info to websites. That's probably the best way to describe it. In other words, it's going to spoof this info. It might, for a simple example, instead of saying you're visiting with Safari, it might say you're visiting with Chrome. Something like that. It's going to send fake information to websites. And that's an effort to fool a site or a third-party service, like an advertiser, again, most likely an advertiser, that attempts to use fingerprinting into it sends false information to, how do I say this? It sends false information to a third-party service that attempts to use fingerprinting, and it sends it to them in order to make them think you're running something different than you are. There you go. That's how I should have said it. And the theory is that by sending fake info, a third-party site or an advertiser or a third-party service that might be embedded on the site that you're visiting can't build a reliable profile of you. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Having this feature on by default for private browsing makes sense. Private browsing is typically used when you don't want information to be collected by your browser, including history, cookies, saved preferences for a website, and so on. For example, and you probably do this too, Darren, I use private browsing when I'm supporting a client and I need to log into their email account, for example. I don't want my browser to remember that I signed in as them. And more importantly, I don't want my browser to remember their login or password or
exactly
anything like that. So I use private browsing, or sometimes called incognito mode. I think Chrome stopped calling it incognito mode. I think they call it private browsing mode, don't they?
They got a bad rap for that now, so they've changed the name. That's the same thing.
But all the major browsers have it. Safari, Firefox, Chrome.
Yes, they all have it, yes.
They all have, sometimes it's called in private browsing for some bizarre reason. But private browsing is the mode whereby which your browser doesn't remember anything about the sites you're interacting with. Okay, so
it's only private locally though, rather than, because your ISP can still see what's going on.
Of course, we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is
locally private.
A website's ability to set cookies and because ultimately those cookies are erased when you quit out of private browsing mode. Even if they set a cookie, that's gone.
That's it. They're gone.
It's gone. It's not saved. So. Perfect. Private browsing is an amazing tool to use when you don't want websites to remember stuff about you. As Darren rightly pointed out, It is not a it's not a means by which to protect your identity so much, though, like VPN might. In other words, as Darren said, when you visit a website, your ISP also has logs, and those logs will record websites you visit. Apple.com. Your ISP will record that in a log. Those logs are typically only kept for a short period of time. I don't think they're kept indefinitely. I don't know why they would keep them indefinitely, but that's determined by the ISP and their privacy policies. But in any event, if you're using a VPN, you're essentially bypassing the ISP's ability to record that information because the sites you're visiting are being tunneled through the VPN and coming out on the other end. So they don't see that. Same thing with using Tor to browse the internet. If you're using the Tor browser, which is the ultimate private browsing experience, if you're using that, again, your ISP can't see the sites you're going through, so they can't collect that information about you. Okay, so that's in a very small nutshell how that works. Now, there are problems with blocking fingerprinting, which is why it's not on by default in Safari for regular browsing. And in particular, it's the way that Safari implements it. It's not necessarily the anti-fingerprinting tools as such, but it does appear to be the way that Safari implements it. And I'm sure Apple's going to fine-tune this later.
Yes, indeed.
But as we discovered, having it on can break websites that depend upon third-party content, even when that content doesn't come from an advertiser or analytics company. By the way, Google Analytics is huge for fingerprinting visitors. I no longer put Google Analytics on any of my client websites because I started to feel uncomfortable with all the data that Google collects about people who visit their sites. So unless a client really, really, really wants it for some particular reason, I don't put it on. We'll use other more standard type of analytics that don't delve into more identifiable features of their site visitors and just give them that broad overview that most people are really looking for. But Google Analytics is horrible for it. I mean, the stuff that they gather about people is amazingly detailed, like right down to your age range and all kinds of
detailed
stuff.
files about you.
And that's because of fingerprinting. And not only fingerprinting, but the fact that you may be signed into a Google account as you're visiting these websites. And because
you would think that would be enough.
That would be enough because Google knows things like your age and where you're located and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's a rat hole. So
it certainly is.
That's a whole conversation in and of itself. But as we discovered, having this on can break websites that depend upon that third-party content. And that's because enabling this feature also breaks, or can break, I should say, can break third-party scripts. It can break third-party functions that might be needed by that website. In my case, it was Vimeo's script or function that determines if the video is being watched on my domain. That was broken by having this feature enabled within Safari.
Yes.
So there you go. Now, you may also find that websites won't be able to remember any changes or settings that you may have made for your preferred way of interacting with the site. If you like a particular website to be in dark mode, for example. Now, at the moment, you may find that having this feature on may cause more problems than you would like, and you'll still get ads. You're still going to get ads, even if they're not relevant to you. And the worst part is, and I hate to say this, but it's true, they can still track you because there are much more complex fingerprinting techniques and monitoring techniques, like monitoring your behavior on a website.
Yes.
The way you
How you wiggle the
interact,
mouse.
yeah, how you wiggle the mouse, the way you interact with a website is actually a technique that's used to
Yes.
fingerprint you. And
Yes.
how you interact with a website is pretty hard to block. So I think in this particular case, it's probably a better idea to stick with Safari's defaults than not. But Darren, you have done a lot of research into this yourself. I know you have some thoughts on it, and then we'll wrap up with a couple thoughts on a couple of my thoughts that I thought I'd save for the end, and then
Cool.
we'll go on from there. So, what say
Okay.
you?
Yeah. Well, this is where it gets tricky because potentially I would have a lot of thoughts, but I probably wouldn't want to dive into all of them, or else we'll have a 14-hour podcast. So,
Well, there's that.
yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I mean, these things are joined together, fingerprinting and cross-site protection tracking. Um, they're sort of part and parcel the same thing, but they are separate things. So I can tell you which one's which
Indeed.
in a bit.
Yeah, they are separate.
They are separate indeed, but the approach to dealing with um, websites that do these things are sort of joined together. So the approach is the same. Um, so it's unfortunate that if you specifically choose to be private, so this is one of the benefits of cookies. They're visible. You can see them. You can manage them. You can say no to them. And you know, so the trouble is, people like advertisers and so on don't like this. They don't like you saying no to being tracked for advertising. They want to they want to track you for advertising. That's how they make their money.
Yeah.
So they don't like this at all.
And I'm going to add one thought to that. One
yeah,
thought
sure.
is that one of the benefits of allowing it is you will see more relevant ads to you. In other words, if you're going to visit a
If you
website with
want
ads,
that, yeah.
you're going to see ads that are much more relevant to you than something that you would never have any interest in. So there is, devil's advocate, there is a good reason to want to know this about
absolutely.
you, but sometimes the way it's used is not
Yes.
right.
But
Yeah.
it should be your choice.
Yes.
So you should be able to choose whether you want relevant ads or just random ads.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And if you make if as a user you make the specific choice to not be tracked, or you want to say no to cookies, that's a perfectly legitimate thing to say, that you choose.
Right.
The fact that you get bypassed and fingerprinted and tracked anyway, whether you say yes or no, it is the real crux of the problem. There are too many websites around the world doing this, and just silently, because nobody knows they're doing it, unless you delve into some very, very deep logs. It's all completely silent. You're silently fingerprinted, whether you agree to it or not. So that's where the problem is. And Apple, by trying to make things a bit more privacy focused, is trying to improve that web situation. But I believe that they were originally planning for OS 26 versions to have this turned on by default, and they haven't done that. And I think this is precisely the reason that there are still websites out there that can potentially break, and they don't want breaking websites appearing in their browser. So the difference is that each web browser maker implements this advanced tracking protection separately in different ways. So some do it more aggressively than others. And as Apple has possibly discovered, if you're a little bit too aggressive with your protections, then it can break more things that others allow. But that's only because the others aren't quite as aggressive as at the advanced protections there. So yeah, what's actually happened? So there's cross-site tracking, which is in its simplest form. You know, when you type a website and you have HTTPS colon slash slash, that's the header, and then you have the domain, which is say www.apple.com, and then on the end, sometimes you'll see a question mark and a lot of random numbers and letters and so on. So that part after the question mark is often a tracking field or an embedded part of a tracking field. So that, say, for instance, you give that URL to a friend. So you've just looked up something on Amazon and you say, oh, this looks good, I'm going to buy this. And you send that off to a friend, including that tracking field in the URL. Then lo and behold, that friend starts to see adverts for the thing that you think you like, that you're going to buy. And then all of the other misconceptions come out, and people say, oh, my phone must be listening in to me because I had this conversation with my friend saying I want to buy a tent, and suddenly he's getting adverts for tents. But it's not because your phone's listening to you, it's because you sent them a URL with an embedded cross-site tracking code in it. So that's where the cross-site tracking bit comes in, and Apple tries to get rid of, or tries to identify what the precise cross-site tracking is without breaking the other parts of what can go after a question mark on a URL, which is a tricky thing to do. So yeah, Apple's got to tread a fine line here, and other browser manufacturers got to tread a fine line if they implement advanced cross-site tracking protection as well, because depending on how they implement it, it can break the web address that you send off to someone else if you're sending them a link.
Well, okay, but let's not freak people out either, because that stuff after the question
Yeah,
mark,
let's try not to.
there are legitimate
All this,
reasons to have
yes,
that stuff after the question mark, even for
yes,
regular old sites.
yes,
And for example, it might be information. Let's pick on Amazon. Some of their URLs have the question marks and the blah blah blah, and
oh, yes,
it's
they
basically
do.
or can be used and should be used and has historically been used to pass variables around
Yes,
as you're
indeed. Yeah.
visiting a
So they're all
website.
muddled up together. So it's very difficult to take out the
Uh,
tracking part.
Yeah, and then the other thing that you'll find is that affiliate links have that on there as well, because
Yes, indeed. You don't want
that's
to break
how
your
the
affiliate
affiliate
links.
learns. So if you want to avoid that, it's simple. You copy the link and you remove everything after the .com or .net or whatever. Remove all that off of there if you want to. If you are
Yes.
visiting, and I don't do this, by the way, I do not have any affiliate links on the Macstock site or the For Mac Guys Only site. There are no affiliate links there. But if you are on a website and you want to lend a little support to that site, they will, and by law they have to tell you, let you know that they have affiliate links within an article that you might be reading, and if you click that link, they may earn a little something on the back end.
That's right. Yes.
If you want to support that site, don't modify those affiliate links. If you don't
Yeah.
care if you support the site or not, then go ahead and remove everything after the .com or .net or whatnot. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to clarify that not every
Well, that's quite, yeah. Yeah.
URL with that content after it is nefarious or used for
No,
cross-site tracking or things like that. There may be a legitimate reason
that's
for
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cross-site tracking part is less nefarious than, or potentially nefarious than the fingerprinting side,
Yeah.
because the fingerprinting is done silently. You don't know what's done with that data that's been gathered. Uh, so yeah, that's the thing. The other thing I was going to mention was that different browsers do things in slightly different ways. So you mentioned that Safari can pretend what some of that data is, which is essentially scrambling. Actually, well, not scrambling, it's just pretending. Brave also does full scrambling, which is quite interesting. So as a browser, Brave, rather than trying to block things, it scrambles the data so it's valid but useless, which is quite an interesting approach. It means less sites break under the way Brave does things for doing fingerprint protection than they do on some other sites, and especially Safari, because it's scrambling rather than trying to block things. So I think when some websites try to block content, when things are being when they're trying to protect against fingerprinting, that's probably where the problems come in. And I was interested to know if this only, because you said you had some direct links for the Vimeo videos. Does that setting only cause an issue if it's embedded? And so if it's not embedded and it's a direct link, is there a similar issue still being caused?
No.
Because as you say, it could be very dependent on that initial embed script.
Right. So the issue comes up when this feature is enabled. So in other words, when you plus the privacy settings of Safari and say, yeah, turn this on for all websites,
all browsing,
that's when the script that Vimeo uses to determine if the video is embedded on the domains you tell it can be embedded on, that's when that script breaks. And
so it's only when it's embedded, not when you give a direct link to it.
Right. And even if I embed it, but I don't enable the feature and say only play on this website, then it doesn't break either. So the script the security script, if you will, for want of a better way to describe it, in other words, the script that determines if the video is being played in the way that I determine it can and should be played, that script is what appears to break. And so, no, when I set up a special way for Bill to watch the videos, which led him directly to a password-protected page on Vimeo with all the videos on it, everything was fine.
I suspect that wouldn't break even with the setting turned on. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I sympathise with looking at the notes that Apple gives you to try to explain this.
There's nothing there.
The trouble with it is, no, there's not much there, and it equates to it's too complicated. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, really, because it's just too complicated. I can understand why, because they've got a small amount of space to put a little explanation on there, and you can't really explain this at all in that small space. So it's too complicated to explain.
Well, okay, but let's also say that when you visit their web page with the exact same help article where they have infinite space to display this stuff, they choose not to. Instead, it's more of a copy and paste. It's more of a copy and paste operation than it is, let's make sure people understand what this setting is. Which is interesting because some of the settings do have a better explanation on them and do tell you why you may or may not want to enable them. But this particular setting has none. And, I was going to mention this in a moment, but I swear, and maybe I'll mention it again, but I'll mention it right now. I swear that at some point while I was testing this, when I turned on that feature to be available in all browsing, I got a warning that said, hey, this may break websites. Yes. I swear that happened. And I swear I saw somewhere that might happen. But in the last day, as I was gathering notes for today's episode, I can't find that warning anywhere. So I'm not sure what has changed or when it changed, but I'm positive that a warning popped up or something. I saw somewhere that if you enable this, certain sites are going to break. But
potentially, yeah.
Now I can't find that warning. So either I'm missing it, or I have documentation blindness. But I can't find it right now.
Right. Well, the more I looked into this, the more I thought, oh, this is actually quite a good idea, and I think it's something that almost all browsers are going to be seeking to implement as soon as they can do that.
Yeah.
But it all depends on web developers out there, as you say, following standards and doing their coding the right way and so on. And there will definitely be edge cases that come out of the woodwork and that nobody ever thought of and thought, oh no, that's what breaks if we do this.
Right.
But the settings themselves seemed like a really, really good idea. So I was convinced, and I've turned them all on for all of my devices now. I've turned that setting on to be used in all browsing rather than just private browsing on my phone, my iPad, and my Mac. And I can see interesting things happen. Like, for instance, it certainly works. And I can certainly see that Google are fingerprinting me, even though I am logging in with a Google account on certain sites. When I turned this setting on and I browsed to the same thing on my iPad and my Mac, it thought I was two different people. So it didn't recognize that. That's the other thing, because some people may think this is a really good idea, and the fingerprinting actually is beneficial. So they may want to say, okay, I want to allow sites to fingerprint me because it makes things very, very convenient, because they know you're the same person visiting from device to device, and you get recommended. Say, for instance, if you're on YouTube, you get recommended the same videos from device to device. And when I turned this setting on, that all stopped. So I was getting shown different things and being treated as a different person when I logged in on my Mac opposed to logging in on my iPad. So I've left these settings on for the moment.
I would be curious to know. One, I really want to know what is being turned on or off when you enable the setting within Safari, because I'm pretty sure that when you visit, say gmail.com or YouTube, that it's cookies that are determining your login state and preferences and things like that. I'm fairly certain that it's cookies that are doing it.
It should be.
Because if I go to if it were fingerprinting, then resetting my browser but keeping everything else the same, they should still recognize me. But clearing the cookies, I'm forced to sign back in again, and it's like they don't know who I am, and you got to go through the security steps and all that kind of stuff. So I'm fairly certain it's cookies on Google. So that leads me to question what's going on at Safari's end when you enable this versus don't enable it. And that's the explanation I think we're looking for here.
Yeah. I log in to, say for instance, I'm logging into Gmail, and there is a cookie already set on my machine for Gmail for that login, and I'm also logging in with the Google account. But with that setting turned on, I get a message to say a new user has logged in with this account on an iMac. So it's treating me like a unique login.
I think it's a
even though I've
combination
logged in before. Yeah, potentially, exactly. Yeah. So, like you say, it's hard to discern exactly what's going on under the covers.
Now it can still be cookies though, because your browser, and this goes back to what I said a little while ago, the fact that your browser is sending out what type of computer you have and the browser you're using and your screen resolution, that's useful information to a website just to operate on a day-to-day basis. It's not necessarily for tracking purposes as it is to ensure that they're giving you the best experience possible. Now, I'm not trying to apologize for Google, because as I also said a moment ago, Google Analytics is horrible. They're tracking all kinds of awful stuff about people that no small business needs to know about the people who are visiting their website. It's just not needed. That you don't need to know that, well, it's way more than you need. All right, let's just stop there. Yeah. So it's possible that Google is merely reading the user agent string and recording that in your account in the security settings and saying, okay, this computer is logged in from this IP address, which by the way is also a little bit of information that gets sent over to them.
Yeah.
Every website gets your IP address. It's just the way the internet works. Sorry, people. Every website gets your internet address, but what they're actually getting is not your personal computer. This is my IP address within my local network at home. They're getting the IP address that your ISP is assigned to
one,
your router before, and that IP address is essentially assigned to your entire home network. Every computer that is on that internal network is using that public IP address to connect to websites. So again, not and that can change. That IP address can change. ISPs often roll those IP addresses. With some it's more frequent. With some it's daily.
Yeah.
If you're connected with a mobile connection, it changes just as you move around and bounce from tower to tower. But with home ISP connections, in our case, we use a mobile carrier for our home internet, and so our IP address changes frequently. But if you have a cable provider or DSL or something like that, it will change less frequently, but it can change. So it's not necessarily an identifying trait, but
no,
in
I don't
aggregate,
think
it can be.
I don't think they're using only one specific thing. I think
No, you're right. Yeah, they're not.
Both Google and others are using a combination of all three. And one of the other things to note is that well, you guys aren't in Europe, so you probably don't see it as much as we do. But the lovely cookie banners over in Europe are
thank you, Europe.
Absolutely hated. Everyone hates cookie banners. And one of the other things is, including Google, they're trying to get rid of cookies altogether.
Yeah.
Although when you look at how Google's implementing this, they don't want it to harm their own advertisement methods.
No, of course not.
Absolutely not. No. So the way other browsers are removing or potentially removing the reliance on cookies is quite different to how Google is going to implement reliance on removal of cookies, and they each support different manifest versions for cookies, so that Google does still do some cookiness in the background, even though they say they are probably not going to be in the future. And it's just implemented differently, and you can see why they're doing it, because they still want to be able to micro-target you for third-party advertising, which is how they make the money.
And again, much like the URLs we talked about, cookies are not in and of themselves bad.
Well, they're not bad.
A cookie is a very useful tool, and many websites set a cookie on your computer for simple things like adding a product to a shopping cart. So if you're on a website,
like I say, you can see them and you can manage them.
Yeah.
Whereas with fingerprinting, it's all done silently, and you don't know what's being gathered and how it's being used and where it's going. Some nefarious websites pass on fingerprinting data to data brokers and try and build up a shadow fingerprint of users and tie all the data together from various browsing sessions to build a real profile for a real identifiable person, and that's where it gets really bad, because you end up with data that you'd never agreed to be out there, that has suddenly been discovered on data broker sites that are selling you effectively data that they had no right to gather in the first place.
Right. Yeah, no, yep, absolutely. And I didn't mean to derail what you were saying. But, if you still had more on the topic.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
That's pretty much it, huh? I did want to touch I'll wrap up in just a second. I wanted to touch very briefly on something you mentioned a moment ago. And I think it was mentioned specifically in relation to Safari. You said you have no way really of knowing when the fingerprinting is happening. And I just wanted to point out that other privacy-focused browsers, Firefox, and we can put Brave in that scenario as well, because Brave is based upon Firefox, and DuckDuckGo and many other privacy-focused browsers will let you know when this kind of stuff, or when they think this kind of stuff is happening. And in Firefox's case, because it's my primary browser, I'm aware of this. In the address bar, in the URL bar, there's a little shield. And when you click on that shield, and I was very interested to see this just a moment ago when I clicked on that little shield while on Amazon. I was interested to see that it does not detect any social media trackers, which, by the way, Firefox is very good about blocking the horrible, horrible Facebook trackers. Boy, talk about horrible.
Wow.
We can complain about Google all you want, but the number of sites that utilize the Facebook pixel is crazy. And how many websites get blocked by Firefox because I have the Facebook blocker enabled on it. But so Amazon, no social media trackers, no fingerprinters, no crypto miners. However, there is tracking content on Amazon site, and it tells me, it gives me all the URLs for the tracking content on Amazon site. So I thought that was really interesting, and it's just a matter of clicking that little shield. To my knowledge, Safari doesn't have something like that you can click and say, show me what's being blocked on this site.
I think
I
there is
could be wrong, but I can't find it.
In Safari, but I don't know how far it goes. So, like you say, it'd be good to compare the two, because I think there is a tracking report in Safari to say what it has blocked, what it hasn't blocked, and well, that might be a separate thing.
I think that's a separate thing. So what I was referring to is just on any given website, you can click that shield and see what's going on. Whereas with Safari, it's kind of a separate report. But let's wrap this up, because this is a never-ending
it's a rabbit hole, this one.
And mouse battle. Speaking of cat, there's Princess right there. This is a never-ending cat and mouse battle. So I can only speak for how I approach these things. I approach these with a medium view of what should be on versus off in my browser's privacy settings. I do block third-party cookies, as I mentioned earlier. I do not enable private relay or limit IP address tracking. And again, because these options only work with Mail and Safari, and I don't use either of those. Plus, I've worked in the field long enough, and I know you have too, Darren, to realize that it's not really doing much for me if I do enable them. Now, and I do know others disagree with me on that. Now, I really don't worry about fingerprinting, if I'm being honest. To me, so what if they know I've got a Mac, or I'm running Tiger versus Tahoe, or my screen resolution is 2560 by 1440. There, the world now knows my screen resolution is 2560 by 1440. Go nuts. It's not like they're recording my home address or my name, unless I specifically give it to them. And then, as you pointed out, it can be aggregated together, right? It doesn't matter if a website says,
streams are added together, then
separate
potentially you could have your address
together,
linked to the other. Say for instance, your purchase history could potentially be linked together with you as being an identified person through the address that's saved. A physical address in Google Maps that you visited, if you have that turned on for tracking you as well. So,
in theory, that could happen. In theory, I don't.
Unlikely, but yes.
Yeah, unlikely. But so in general, day-to-day practice, the concept of fingerprinting in general doesn't bother me so much. When you start to combine fingerprinting with other information gathering techniques, I think that's when we start to have a little trouble. And I still don't believe to this day that most of the websites that we are visiting are gathering that type of information for anything nefarious, or even realize that they're gathering it at all, quite frankly. A lot of it's gathered on the hosting side of things, and unless you go seek that information out, it's not necessarily being gathered, with the exception of Google Analytics or other analytics that may be gathering it and passing that information on. So it's gosh, there's so
It's a
many
difficult one.
nuances
It's a can
to
of
this.
worms. Yeah, exactly. There's
The
a whole
can of worms.
privacy angle.
You just said
There's
it.
loads.
But
Yeah.
in general, I don't worry too much about fingerprinting. Now, I also use Firefox as my default browser, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And as I mentioned earlier, if I get ads that are more relevant to me, in truth, it's not that I'm getting the ads, and it's not the fact that the ad is more relevant to me, but I find that when an ad is relevant to me, I can more easily tune it out.
Oh, that's interesting.
I have
That's an interesting
gotten
take.
pretty good about tuning out ads. I don't even notice the ads in many times unless they're those in-your-face video playing type ads, and those annoy the heck out of me. But if it's just a regular old ad on the side, something that is of potential interest to me, I can tune out better than something that might be new to me and catches my eye, you know? So for me, I think it's a little easier to tune them out. So that might be a very small side benefit to this big problem of cookies and fingerprinting and tracking and all that. I will say that Apple takes somewhat of a medium approach with their default Safari settings as well. And I think that's probably a good approach. I don't necessarily argue with that approach. I think it's a good one. Now, you're going to come across many different opinions on what you should or shouldn't do when it comes to your privacy, or maybe I should say how paranoid you should be. And a good example of that is the Apple commercial with the cameras flying around. That is just like preying upon people's paranoia like crazy. I really dislike that commercial because it gives people the wrong impression of what's really going on in favor of convincing people they should be either using a Mac or using Safari or using an iPhone or whatnot. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous, if I'm being honest. But that's marketing. That's marketing, not technical truth. But I tend to fall on the less paranoid end of the spectrum. And keep in mind that what we've just presented, this last hour and a half of discussion about this, is in itself just a broad and general overview on the topic.
Oh, yes. If you go deeper, and it's probably not a good idea to go deeper in this one.
And as you personally delve into this topic, as you did, Darren, in the last few days when you knew this was coming up, you dove a little bit deeper into it. I dove a little bit deeper into it to answer Bill's questions. People listening are going to dive into it. As you dive into it, you are going to personally find a spot on the privacy scale that works best for you. And that's the most important takeaway here, is what is important to you. And you hinted, if not outright said this, Darren, everyone's going to have their own comfort level with how much or how little they are willing to share. If you do decide to leave the feature on in Safari, and I think you said you still have it on, right?
Yeah, I've got it turned on now, and I'm going to leave it like that for a while. See what happens. So I'm very interested to see how things go with it.
Cool. Report back to us. I want to know, because if you do keep it on, just keep in mind, keep in the back of your head there that it may break legitimate sites. You know.
Absolutely. So it's probably fine. Yeah.
Yeah. From time to time, you may come across a site that doesn't work properly. Just keep that little nugget in the back of your head that you've got this on, because when you well, I meant you in the royal you, not you specifically, Darren, but the royal we. Keep in mind that if you turn this on, keep in mind that you've got it on, because when you come across a site that doesn't work, try turning it off. If it fixes it, great. Use that site and then go turn it back on again. You know, maybe you can even script it to turn it on and off again. But I also wanted to mention, if you are serious about privacy, it's not a bad idea to switch to a browser that's a little bit more focused on your privacy, such as Firefox or Brave or the browser that Bill tested, DuckDuckGo. As we've shared on the show before, and I'm going to share again right now because I love this browser, Firefox has had default protection against social media trackers, cross-site cookies in all windows, tracking content in private windows, crypto miners, fingerprinters, and a relatively new feature, total cookie protection, which contains cookies to the site that you are on, thus preventing trackers from following you between sites. So this is all on by default in Firefox. And, I should point out, Firefox actually cares about your privacy, and they've had that standard tracking protection on for quite some time now. And even better, their fingerprinting protection doesn't break the Macstock website. So I love them for that. Now, as I said a moment ago, and I'll just mention again, I swear I saw somewhere that Apple warns that turning on the advanced tracking and fingerprinting setting for standard browsing might break sites, but I can't find it. So I'm going to say that unlike Apple, if or when you decide to up the enhanced tracking protection in Firefox, and you can, there's 2 levels above the standard level. If you decide to up your standard tracking protection, they make it very clear that doing so might break the sites that you visit. So,
yes, yeah.
There you go. There you go, Bill. A nice, simple answer to your simple question.
It only took us an hour and a half to explain it.
That's right. That's right. Now, listener feedback. We got some really great listener feedback. Episode 457, you'll remember I had a quick tip about checking the battery life on your mouse. If it's plugged in and charging, how do you check the battery life on your mouse? And I discovered quite by accident that if you just simply click the button on that mouse while it's charging, you get a notification that pops up in the top right of your screen that says, hey, your mouse is at 58% or whatever it happens to be. Super cool. But I commented that there does not seem to be an equivalent to that with the keyboard while it's charging. And there's various reasons for it. I mean, what key do you set up to be the key that you press to get that notification, right? And the other problem is that while you're charging the keyboard, you can still use it. So it kind of seems like you don't need that functionality, but I kind of lamented that it wasn't there. Well, a couple listeners shared how they do it. Ivan wrote, hello, Mike. You have an excellent podcast that is very informative without being repetitive. Well, thank you, Ivan. That means the world to all of us here at For Mac Guys Only. Thank you so much for saying that. We try not to be repetitive, but I don't know. Have we repeated anything this episode, Darren? I think we might have. So a little repetitiveness.
Oh, no.
Anyway, Ivan wrote, the best and quickest way is to click on the Bluetooth icon in the menu bar, and it shows the percentages of charge. Yes, that's an excellent tip. Additionally, the Bluetooth section of System Preferences should show the charging status of trackpad and keyboard along with your Apple headphones and earbuds. And by clicking on the icon, the information icon in the Bluetooth panel, it will show your percentages. And then Ivan also mentioned, and I think we mentioned this when we talked about it, in the notification center, you can add the battery widget. And in the notification center, you will get a notification of the charging status of your keyboard and trackpad. And, you'll see that box with the 4 items, he says, including your trackpad, keyboard, and other devices. And I've even seen like Bluetooth speakers show up in there.
Yes,
cool.
I'm currently looking at it now. I've got it on my desktop actually. That particular widget, and it shows, because I'm attached to my Mac with my Bluetooth headphones, it's got the battery indicator for my Bluetooth headphones on there as well. So it's wonderful. I just glance at the desktop and I can see all of my battery status levels for everything attached. Yeah.
He writes, there will be a charging lightning bolt icon in the circle that surrounds the charging indicator. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yes.
This is a
Brilliant.
pleasure for me to be able to share information with you as much as you have done for us. We couldn't repay you for the knowledge that you have given us. Well, I thank Darren and Eric and everybody else who
Wow.
joins me on For Mac Guys Only for the last 19 years. You know, what they say is when you want to look smart, surround yourself by smart people, and that's what I try to do. So, no, thank you so very much, Ivan. That means a lot to us. And then our friend Lisa shared not only her favorite way to check keyboard battery status, but also some thoughts on replacing her Apple ecosystem as well, which was the topic of the show. Lisa wrote, with Sequoia 15.7, she writes, clicking the Bluetooth symbol in the menu bar while the Apple keyboard is plugged in and charging. That's emphasized. While the keyboard is plugged in and charging, clicking the Bluetooth symbol in the menu bar will show the battery level with a grayed out look and the lightning symbol for charging across the number showing the level. Cool. Okay, excellent.
Yes.
I did not know that, and that's
subtle.
probably a nice quick way to do it too. So with Ivan and Lisa's feedback, we've got 3 awesome ways to check the keyboard battery levels. Now, Lisa did want to comment on the replacing the Apple ecosystem. She wrote, when I had to ditch the 227 iMacs, and she agrees with us that 24 inches is too small, she said she did rebuild her ecosystem from scratch. She got the Mac Mini, the bigger one, the 7-inch one. So this was a couple years ago. She got the Mac Mini, Apple Display, OWC dock with a hard drive and SSD inside, MacBook Air with another OWC dock for more ports, and as she says, a slew of belt and braces, external drives for Time Machine and Carbon Copy Cloner, which is great. You know, so not only is she doing Time Machine, but she also is doing Carbon Copy Cloner backups. As she says, belt and suspenders or belt and braces.
Belt and braces, yeah.
She continues, love my iPad Mini 6, but do not need the newest with Apple Intelligence features. Fair enough. I have the iPhone 13 that doesn't have Apple Intelligence features. Still on iPhone 14. The 2 of us, meaning Lisa and her husband, have not replaced the iPhone 14s. And she writes, she assumed the elephant didn't sit on those iPhones and the iPad. Oh, and she also writes, she has a great honking 15 terabyte Western Digital external hard drive just to make more backups of my photos. And she says it was all more expensive than the $4,000 to $5,000 that we talked about on the show.
We were a bit more conservative.
A little more conservative.
Yeah.
It was OWC docks, and especially with the hard drive and the SSD inside, and the OWC Thunderbolt dock for the MacBook Air. They're
drives and storages.
They're not super expensive, but they're also not super cheap. So yeah, that definitely, you could be looking at probably $800 to $1,000 additional just for that stuff. So yeah, that sounds like a fantastic setup. Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. And then finally, I wanted to wrap up with listener feedback from Bryan, who shared not Bryan in our chat room. This is a different Bryan, actually. Bryan shared a really cool project that he created. And you know what? I'm going to show this to everybody who's watching the live stream in just a second. But he wrote, I just thought I'd share this piece he finished, an art piece he finished. It uses 24 real Apple credit cards, Van Gogh glass, a custom, which is a custom 24 by 24 by half inch low iron tempered glass, and he writes lots of epoxy. He also put 1-inch wall standoffs on it, and he added some neon LEDs, which add a nice glow. The Van Gogh glass color shifts in direct light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over here for those watching the live stream. I want to show people this because this is really cool. Right there. So what he created on a piece of glass. He took
Okay.
24 Apple credit cards and
Oh,
epoxied them to this piece of glass in the shape of the Apple logo. And then in this particular case, he's showing it within a fireplace enclosure, but he's got the blue neon light behind it, which is pretty darn cool looking, if you ask me. Now, he writes about the 24 cards. I ordered a replacement in the wallet app, and then he wanted another as a souvenir. And then he just kept on ordering them. And surprisingly, the app just kept letting him order new
oh,
cards. So he
wow.
ended up with about 40 Apple cards. 40 Apple cards. So let me show you what that looks like. There you go. There's a stack of 40
Wow.
Apple cards that he got. And this is all through the Apple Wallet app. He just kept saying he wanted a replacement card, and it would send him a replacement card. And then he would say, I want a replacement card, and it'd send him another replacement card. And so he ended up with about 40 Apple cards. And of those 40, he used 24 of them to make the Apple logo that we showed you. Now, he also wrote, he emailed Tim Cook about a year ago explaining that you shouldn't be able to do this. And I agree with
Oops.
him. You should not be able to keep ordering replacement cards. Now, he said that the day after he emailed Tim Cook, he got a call from someone at Apple the very next day. And her first
Wow.
question was, why? which I love. But
Oh,
but yes, he wrote he loves Apple, and he thought that this was a great way to show that love. Now, I did ask him. I said, every time you order a replacement card, are you getting a new number? And he said, yeah, that's the downside that he encountered on the way to his sculpture, because he also shared, and I'll put the sculpture back up there again. He also shared that he stopped using his card during this time where he kept ordering replacement cards because stuff would get screwed up. He would activate the new card, and the wallet sometimes would show the old card details, and so on and so on. And of course, if you're
oh,
getting a new card
yes.
number every time, that screws up automatic payments and all that kind of stuff. And then as for reaching out to Apple about this bug in the system, Bryan also shared, and I did ask him if I could share this on the show. He also said that I don't know if they listened. He hasn't tried reaching out to them in a while, been there, done that. But what I told the Apple rep when they called was, do you want me to fly in to write the logic to limit the replacement cards over a period of time? I mean, I can't believe that code wasn't there from day one. I don't even know how much it
Uh,
costs Apple to ship. All 40 cards came FedEx, and they came fast. And the packaging and the production, because remember, it's a titanium card, right? Packaging, the production, and the shipping, it's a lot. And then
yeah.
finally he shared, I did stop once I was at around 40, only because I didn't need any more cards, and I just wanted to tell Tim that something is wrong here, more to just prove a point about bad app design early on. So he also shared a couple other pictures with me, and I'm going to share them here on the live stream. So this is the artwork in his fireplace enclosure. And I showed you what he calls Apple Orchard, which is all 40 cards stacked up there next to his keyboard.
Oh,
But he also shared the mock-up of the design on his floor. So before he mounted it to the glass, he
hmm.
was mocking it up on the floor, just kind of make sure he got the design the way he wanted it. And then we've got a picture of the final sculpture hanging on the wall here, which is beautiful. So again, this is 24 by 24. He called it Van Gogh glass, half-inch thick, cards lined up in the shape
Yeah,
of the
that's
Apple
fancy.
logo, little standoffs, and then a neon light behind it to add the glow to it. Super cool project. I love it. And
Completely mad, of course, but
Of
yes,
course,
perfect.
of course. But, you know, as he said, he loves Apple, and this was just a way to show that love for the company. And, you know, as we know, folks like us who are Apple fans sometimes do mad, crazy things. And,
Strange things, absolutely.
you know, look, it could be stranger, but I think that this is great. The
Yeah.
question, of course, is why did Apple allow him to order so many replacement cards over such a short period of time? The world may never know.
Unfortunately, we can't get any of those over here. We're not allowed yet.
Thanks, Bryan, for sharing that. That is awesome. He also shared it with a couple other Apple notables out there, and got equally enthusiastic responses back from them. And why wouldn't you? This is a cool project. I love it. I love it. It reminds me of when folks would take their old Mac Pros and make coffee tables out of them and
Oh,
things like that.
yes,
Remember
yes.
that? Yeah. I've got a couple G5 Macs. Mac Pros. I should probably turn into coffee tables because can't use them for much else at this point. All right, cool. Well, Darren, with that said, that brings us to our essential app this episode. You know, we just wrapped up season 19 of For Mac Guys Only. When we kicked off the year, wait, was it this year or last year? I can't remember now. We kicked off with our essential apps episode, and we decided
Oh,
to
yeah.
just keep going. I think it was 2 years ago. We just decided to keep going. So every episode we present another essential app. These are apps that we feel should be found in everybody's applications folder. And my pick this week is perhaps one of the simplest apps that we have ever shared as an essential app, but it is an incredibly useful one. And that app is called Caffeine.
Oh,
Caffeine is available at caffeine-app.net. It is a free app, and when you run Caffeine, all it does is put a little empty coffee cup up in your menu bar, and when you click that coffee cup, it enables Caffeine. And what does enable Caffeine do? It makes sure that your Mac will not sleep. It will not automatically sleep when Caffeine is enabled. And as you might guess, with an app this simple, very few preferences to adjust. The very first time you launch Caffeine, it's going to pop up and it's going to ask you, what do you want the default sleep duration to be? And the default is 1 hour, I believe. It will ask you if you want to activate Caffeine when you start it. In other words, when you launch the app, do you want it to automatically prevent sleep? And it will ask, there's a checkbox to deactivate Caffeine when the device goes to sleep manually. So if you go up to the Apple logo and you choose to manually sleep your Mac, do you want to deactivate Caffeine? Yep, makes sense. And then the last option is to show the preferences when you start Caffeine. Now, I find that useful. I think it's very useful because I don't keep Caffeine running all the time. I only use it when I very strictly do not want my display to sleep. So I think it's useful to have those preferences pop up. So I leave that checked, but I do not have Caffeine checked to automatically activate when I start it. And I don't have it set to deactivate when the device goes to sleep manually. Otherwise, yeah, super, super simple app. Free app available at caffeine-app.net. Link for it will be in the show notes. But if you have the need, like I sometimes do, to force your Mac to not automatically sleep, then Caffeine may be the app for you.
yeah, cool. I mean, that's particularly useful for machines that, say you have a headless Mac without a monitor somewhere and you need to remote onto it and you just don't want it to go into sleep mode. Especially, and I'm not entirely sure because I haven't tried this out, but if you have File Vault enabled on your Mac, you may have trouble remoting onto it because you have to sign in first, and if a machine has been restarted and the sign-in screen is sitting there waiting for you to log into at the BIOS level before it decrypts for you to boot onto the Mac.
Yeah.
Caffeine might be very useful in a state like that, where you've got like a Mac on your network that isn't connected to a screen or anything, and you just need to keep that awake so that you can remotely log into it, especially if it's got file vault enabled.
Right, right. And you bring up a good point, because you mentioned this last episode. You shut down your Macs when you're done with them for the day. And
I do indeed.
I leave mine on. Now,
Indeed.
I don't have Caffeine running in the background because I also set my Macs to not, I let the display sleep, but I don't allow the Mac
not the
to
machine
sleep.
itself. Yeah.
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 So, and that's because I do have the need to remote into them. So rather than let them sleep, which would prevent the remote application, as you just pointed out, prevent the remote application from recognizing I'm trying to connect to it remotely, I leave them awake when the display is off. That's the setting, is allow your Mac to sleep when the display is off. And so I uncheck that so that the Mac itself does not sleep and my remote access application stays running. So that's another way to do it. I use Caffeine at Macstock because we use Ecamm Live, like we're using right now. We use Ecamm Live for recording and producing the content that people see up on the projectored screens, as well as what gets recorded for the digital pass. And so I use Ecamm for that. And it's a good idea to not let the machine sleep while you're in production mode. So I fire up Caffeine, ticket to not allow the Mac to sleep, and we're good to go. So, yeah. But, there's lots of different reasons to have it. Wonderful app, simple app, and for many people, an essential app. So, Darren, with that said, I think that's going to do it for this episode of For Mac Guys Only. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, we do love to get your letters, so if you have any comments about the show, a tip to share, a software or hardware problem with your Mac, or you have your own Apple-related sculpture you would like to share with us, be sure to leave your favorites in the comments of this week's show notes found at formacguysonly.com, or you can drop me a line, mike@formacguysonly.com. And do be sure to subscribe to the show's YouTube channel at youtube.com/FMEOTV. Click that little notification bell, and you can find out when we are going live. You can join the chat room and catch all the behind-the-scenes stuff that doesn't make the final cut of the show. Hey, Darren, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Cool. If folks want to get hold of me, they can email me at darren@formacisonly.com, and I shall eagerly await emails.
Awesome. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Darren for joining me this episode. Stay subscribed, and we'll talk to you next time. And with that said, we are going to wrap up the live stream, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for joining us in the chat room. And we will see you November 8th for the start of For Mac Guys Only's 20th season. See you then. In the meantime, bye live stream.
Cheers.